Boker Tov, everybody. Hope everybody's well. Nice to see you. Okay, so just before we start, I mean that while we start, we'll start. I don't remember the context. Maybe somebody remind me. But right at the end of the class last week, somebody asked me about being a journalist. This lashon hara. I must have said something that triggered that question. But if nobody remembers, then I can't blame you. I don't remember. Okay, so I just want to spend just a couple minutes on that. So I mean, I said right away at the time that I don't really see it's a problem. I mean, it's a problem if it's done like I mentioned in the New York Post or something. If you're a gossip columnist, of course that's terrible. But that has nothing to do with journalism. That has to do with what you're doing. I mean, you're spreading false things or making up stories or looking for things that are unimportant. But journalism as a field is actually very important. As a matter of fact, I would say it's a big mitzvah. So I figured I'll take a look. How many people have read this book? False Facts and True Rumors by Daniel Feldman. Daniel Feldman's a tremendous Talmid Chacham. He's a Rabbi at YU. He's written written in Svarim, in Hebrew, in English, Divine Footsteps, and he writes a lot on Mitzvot Ben Adam Lechaveiro, which is nice and maybe unfortunately unusual. So he has a whole, there's a whole book on Lashon Hara in the modern era, and it's really fascinating. The Chavetz Chaim wrote the book, classic Gemaras, Lashon Hara. But this is, the internet, social media, all the fascinating questions. Can you discuss with your wife? Can you talk Lashon Hara to your wife? Maybe that is allowed because it's different and it's important. Ishto, Kabbalah, whatever. So he has a whole, not a whole, he just has a few pages on journalism. And he quotes here right at the beginning, he quotes the Chazon Ish. We are permitted and in fact required to be aware of the character and behavior of communal leaders and etc. I mean, that's well known. Unfortunately, I remember Rav Schechter once told us, people think the Chavetz Chaim, which he got his name because of his book on Lashon Hara. I mean, his name wasn't the Chavetz Chaim. His name was Yisrael Meir Kagan. And why don't we call him the Mishnah Berurah? I guess sometimes people do call him the Mishnah Berurah, but he's more known in history as the Chavetz Chaim. So people think that the Chavetz Chaim is a book when you're not allowed to talk Lashon Hara. So I remember Shechter told us the exact opposite. The Chavetz Chaim is a book is when you're allowed and when you're obligated to talk Lashon Hara. That's what the book's about, because it's not true that when it's not defined Lashon Hara. Okay, I guess this is also a parsha share this week, because we all know we connect Tazria, our sages connect Metzora to Tzarat to Lashon Hara. But very often you're obligated to speak lashon hara. Let's say I'll give one simple example is in a court of law. You're in a court case, so I can't talk lashon hara. I don't know if I ever mentioned it. I remember a friend of mine here, someone grew up in England, down in Grzinski. For those who know him in Toronto, the bakery, Grzinski's Bakery. So he said that once, I think it was Diane Arenshaw, one of the Dayanim in England, was called to testify in a court case. So the lawyer said to him, "I understand you are the biggest expert in Jewish law in the United Kingdom." And he said, "Yes, yes, sir, I am." So I think the judge said, "I thought rabbis are supposed to be humble." So he said, "Yes, but I'm in a court of law. I have to speak the truth." So there is it's a cute line, but it's really true. It's really
It,
true.
it was Abramsky. It wasn't their intro.
Oh, Zabromsky, you know the story. Yecheskel Abramsky. Okay, thank you very much. I have a feeling these stories, like Vera Wine said, anybody who believes all of them is a fool. Anybody who believes none of them is a heretic, So I don't know. It could have been said either one, but thank you very much, Bina. I really don't know. And I could be remembering it wrong, but but the story is true, even if it didn't happen. That's true. The story didn't have to happen to be true. So in a court of law, you have to speak the truth. So he was being in a nice way, but you have to say negative things about people. Everybody knows for shidduch, for business, all these things, you have to be truthful. And here, what he starts beginning, a community, you want to appoint a rabbi. It's very important to investigate who the rabbi is, and people have to come forth and talk, quote unquote. It's lashon hara, but it's permissible, or not even permissible. It's obligatory lashon hara. We flip the switch. I don't know that there's ever a case when you are permitted to talk lashon hara. Either you're obligated to or you're forbidden to. In other words, to say something negative is bad, but sometimes it's necessary. So when it's necessary, you must say it. It's not like I'm allowed to talk. When you're obligated to talk. If I remember now correctly, um, by the way, you should know, it's not a sheer on Lashon Hara, but okay, it is the parsha, whatever. It's always important. Not everybody accepts all the premises of the Chavetz Chaim. It's not like he's the whatever. He has some, but I'm trying to think now. What's the case? I should have thought before, where you see a real difference in. Oh yeah, I know, right. I'll tell you just one quick rule. The Chavetz Chaim has a rule. So I told you that the book, the Sefer Chavetz Chaim, is a book of when you're supposed to teach Lashon Hara. It's not when you're not allowed to. Yeah, he says all the prohibitions, then he explains. Okay, now in this case, in that case, so the Chavetz Chaim lays a number of conditions that you have to speak. You have to know the facts, and it can't be whatever. That's not for now. Yeah, a whole series of conditions. So one of the conditions is that you have to be doing it for the right purpose. In other words, let's say I don't like some guy. So now I have an excuse to talk Lashon Hara about him. So I'm so excited. Like, that's great. I'm not doing it because to promote justice. I'm not doing it to save somebody from a bad business deal. I'm doing it because I really hate this guy guts. And now I can do it. So the Chavetz Chaim said that's not allowed. The Chavetz Chaim says that you cannot talk Lashon Hara. The person talking Lashon Hara has to be properly motivated. So that I hope people understand. That's a tremendous chiddush. That's you can argue. Many people argue on that because why do you talk Lashon Hara? The reason you talk Lashon Hara is to save harm from somebody else. So who cares what your motive is? I'm negatively. My motive is very negative. I don't like you, so I'm going to talk Lashon Hara about you. But that Lashon Hara has to be spoken. That Chavetz Lashon Hara has to be spoken. So it has to benefit you. Who cares what my motive is if it has to help you? So that's just one area where many people argue on the Chavetz Chaim and on that principle that you have to be properly motivated to talk Lashon Hara. And basically what it boils down to is this notion. I don't think the Chavetz Chaim explains it like this, but my understanding, we have a notion in halacha known as an aveira lishma. I don't know if we've ever spoken about that. An aveira lishma, it's a fascinating concept. Very dangerous concept of mitzvah. It means the Gemara says gedola aveira lishma, to do a sin, something wrong that you're properly motivated lishma for the sake of heaven is greater than a mitzvah done shalom lishma. You're half asleep and you don't really care. You daven in the morning because you have to daven. You're not really doing it lishma. An avera, and the example the Gemara gives is Yael who slept with Sisra. That's like not such a nice thing to do, but she was doing it to save the Jewish people. Maybe that's a whole other question. Maybe that is allowed, a mitzvah then. So since she did it lishma, then that's greater. So the Gemara then qualifies that. Maybe it's only the same. Maybe it's not greater. So we have this notion of an aveira lishma, but it has to be lishma. You have to do it totally motivated. That's how the Nesiv explains why Yaakov Avinu was punished when he tricked Esav. He was punished by Esav, not by Yitzchak. In other words, the Gemara says by Tzak, Mordechai went out in the city. They used the same expression Esav used. That because of what he did to Esav, Yaakov was punished. It doesn't say because of what he did to Yitzchak, he was punished, even though that's in a sense worse. So Yitzchak, his father, how could he do that? Esav was not such a nice guy, his brother. But when he did it to his father, he felt terrible. It was terrible, but he had no choice. What could he do? When he did it to Esav, he got a little bit, now I can get back at my brother. That's how he writes. Whether that actually happened, I don't know. So therefore, he was punished because the aveira of cheating his father, it was an aveira, but he had to do it. Let's assume he had to do it. So when he did it with Yitzchak, it was totally lishma. When he did it with Esav, it wasn't lishma. So an aveira has to be totally lishma. So the Chavetz Chaim is assuming when you speak Lashon Hara that you're obligated to speak, that's an aveira lishma. An aveira lishma, you must be properly motivated. And if you're not properly motivated, you cannot say Lashon Hara. I don't know if that's the case. I don't know anybody who could ever speak Lashon Hara. Are we ever properly motivated? And other people say no, it's not an avera. It's not an avera lishma. It's not that it's a sin that you're doing for. It's not a sin in that situation. It's not a sin, and therefore, who cares what your motive is? It's nice to do it for the proper motive, but we all know that once you do a mitzvah, even if you're not properly motivated. Okay, anyways, but don't want to spend too much time on that. But if you want to read it, this book is really a fascinating book, False Facts and True Rumors. But he speaks about the importance of journalism. Of course, where to draw the line, he said, it's very hard. You can't write a Shulchan Aruch, what you can put in the New York Times and whatever. You have to, a journalist has to, it is good. You want a journalist who's religious, who's motivated, but investigative journalism and to dig up stuff that may be relevant on people who want to run for public office. It's absolutely not only acceptable, it's meritorious. It's the proper thing to do. Of course, not everything that they pick, not the way it's done today, all the schmutz they pick up necessarily. I don't know. I really don't know. Is it important that somebody had an affair 25 years ago? I don't know. I don't know if that's important to know about somebody. Maybe about a rabbi it's important. Maybe about a politician not important. Those are really are specific questions, but general questions. They once cheated on their taxes. He smoked marijuana once. All the cases that people have lost their political careers because of some indiscretion they did 20 years ago that they may not have repeated. But anyways, being a journalist is a noble profession if it's done properly, and it's a very important task. And he actually quotes, very interesting. He quotes the Shvut Yaakov, I believe, Rabbi Yaakov Reischer, one of the great poskim of the 17th, 18th century, I believe, who said he bases it on this, that you're allowed to read a newspaper on Shabbos. The Nasiv got into trouble reading newspapers on Shabbos because it has important information. And you may be reading quote unquote Lashon Hara, but that's the job of a paper. Okay, enough of that. Let's move on. Any questions, comments? I don't even remember who asked me the question last week on journalism. Maybe they're not even here. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's get back where we'll just to wrap B'techazena Einenu and Modim. So of course, what I was alluding to the last week, and we were talking about talking about the last word, the Tachazena Einenu V'shuv Chalatzim B'Rakamim. We should merit to see God returning in peace and mercy, and we discussed whether the redemption is going to happen regardless of what we do. That's that's a debate. Our tradition is split. Some say that's what we saw Machloket in the Gemara, Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Yeshua. The redemption will happen. It might happen peacefully and nicely if we merit it. It might happen painfully if we don't merit it. And that's why Hillel said, not the famous Hillel of Shammai Hillel, but a later Rabbi Hillel said he doesn't want to be alive. Oh, no, maybe it wasn't him. He said something else. I don't want to be alive during the Messianic period. Too many wars, who knows what's going on in that period, too much pain. So that's one opinion. The opinion of the Rambam is no, that the opinion of the Rambam is the Techazena Einenu. We will only fully see God returning to Zion if we do tshuva, if we repent. What if we never repent? So the Mashiach will never come. But that goes against the Rambam's principle of faith, that animamim, the Chol Yom She'avo, that he can come. So he says that, so Rav Soloveitchik beautifully explains that belief in the Messiah is a belief in the Jewish people. It's such a beautiful idea that we have to believe the Jewish people. It's hard to believe in the Jewish people sometimes. You see what goes on. But other times you see the beauty. We have both, it's the Gemara says that the Mashiach will come either in this other opinion says the Mashiach will come either in generations which are totally righteous or totally evil. Totally righteous because we are deserving, totally evil because we need it. I think we live in both generations at the same time. That the Jewish people have amazing things, unbelievable things, and the righteousness and the helping. And on the other hand, we do the fighting, the narrative, the things we fight about, the arguing, and the stupidity and the craziness. When the sinat chinam that we still have, we have both. We have so I don't know. Maybe that's why we're living. Who knows? I don't know if we're in the Messianic era. But anyway. That was yesterday's discussion. Where I assume your rabbi in Shul must have spoken about that yesterday. No, for Yom Ha'atzmaut, is it Atchalta de Gula, the middle of the Gula, the end of the Gula, no Geula, whatever it is. But so that was a debate how the Gula will come. But the Rambam says we have to do tshuva, and the Gula coming means that we have to believe in in the Jewish people. Okay, of course, the idea that I don't think I ever expressed, I didn't say it, but it's obvious or obvious there, the idea that when the Jewish people went to exile, God went into exile with us. God came into exile with us, and Imo Anochi Bitsara. I suffer the pain, and that's also on you. How do you interpret that? But that idea that God needs the Jewish people, he suffers. Of course, now God perhaps has returned to have his presence, mainly, of course, focused in the land of Israel. Okay, so I just want to mention two things, and then one is, of course, the Beit Hamikdash. Just we've often mentioned there are two mitzvot, or I guess two ways we worship God. And that we worship God ba'ahava and we worship God b'yira. We worship God out of v'ahavta et Hashem Elokecha. You have to love the Lord your God with all your soul, with all your might, with all your heart. I did the wrong order, but whatever. And then you have to have yirat Hashem. Yirat Shemayim, fear of the heaven, and et Hashem Elokecha tira, and you have to fear God. So, and we mentioned that the ava and yira in many ways are contradictory, because there's no mitzvah to love your parents, because the mitzvah is to yira. Yira, you want to fear, awe. Rav Soloveitchik notes yira Hashem. I always translate. I'm sure you've heard of yira, not as fear, but as awe. You have to be in awe. Rav Soloveitchik notes there is one time when we do pray for fear, mamish fear of God, and that's on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. Ubechein teim pachtecha Hashem Elokecha kol masecha. Pachad is fear. You're afraid. So that's there is an element of pachad in our relationship. The Sefer Ketuvim, the Book of Life and death are open, but generally it's not in the Torah. There's no mitzvah in the Torah to have pachad to Hashem. The mitzvah is yirat Hashem, to be in awe of God. But we mentioned many times that the Ramban explains avat Hashem mitzvah say. Positive mitzvot demonstrate our love of God. We do something for God. We put a mezuzah on our house. We love God. We want to demonstrate, show the whole world we're proud to be Jewish. Even you wear a Magen David, that has some relevance. It's also very nice for another time. But and mitzvah lota say, I won't eat pork. That means I'm in awe of God. Lota say, and since Ava is greater than Yira, so mitzvah say dochelota say, when there's a conflict between a positive and a negative mitzvah, the classic case of the Talmud, it's a funny case, but if you have tzitzis, you have wool tzitzis, and a linen garment and wool tzitzis, so it's kilaim, and that's your four-corner garment. So I'm not allowed to wear it. It's kilaim, but it's also tzitzis. So we say that no, the positive mitzvah of tzitzit overweighs the negative mitzvah of kilaim, which the Ramban explained, because the mitzvah to love God is greater than the mitzvah to fear God. Now, somebody should ask me a good question now. What question should somebody ask me? What I just said, that the mitzvah of wearing tzitzis overrides the prohibition of kilaim. So somebody should ask me. Okay, I'll ask me. That should say, what about mitzvah aveira? Any mitzvah that the means don't just, the ends don't, what's the expression? The ends don't justify the means, right? You're not allowed, you can't steal a lulav. That's the classic case in Talmud. You steal a lulav, there's no mitzvah. Right, lulav agazel. So what do you mean? How can I do tzitzis? I'm wearing kilaim. There's no tzitzis. I did an aveira. That's a mitzvah through an aveira. So the very simple answer, and that depends if it's between man and man and man and God. God is happy for you to do tzitzis and not wear kilaim, but God doesn't want you to steal from somebody else. It's a powerful idea. The mitzvah between man and man are on a higher level, because they're also between man and God. So yes, I'm not allowed to do a sin for man to do a mitzvah to God. That's ridiculous. But I am allowed and obligated to do a sin to God. So just like our Lashon Hara talk, this is a time. So you're allowed to wear kilayim to do tzitzis. Why am I telling you all this? Just to note that it's true. Generally, Avat Hashem is more important, except in the Beit Hamikdash. The Torah tells us, Et Shabtotai Tishmor, we're going to read it next week, actually. Et Shabtotai Tishmor Umikdashi Tira'u. You should keep my Shabbos and have Yira, the Beit Hamikdash. The Beit Hamikdash is a Makam Yira. very, very different. How you act in the Beit HaMikdash is very different than how you act anywhere else. That's, by the way, to take one funny example. You can't wear shoes in the Beit HaMikdash, right? The reason a mourner doesn't wear shoes is not so much he's mourning. Its shoes represent the power of man. You can walk on things, on stones, whatever. When you're shoeless, you're sort of powerless. So when you're in the presence of God, so the first thing God tells Moshe, the burning bush, is take off your shoes. And on Yom Kippur, where we stand before God, we can't wear shoes. And on a mourner is being weakened, can't wear shoes. And anybody in the Beit HaMikdash can't wear shoes. I just wanted to point out that there's this notion that the Beit HaMikdash and by it's the difference between a Beit HaMikdash and a Beit Knesset. A Beit Knesset is considered a shul is considered our home, and God visits our home, and a temple is considered God's home, and we visit God's home. And God's home, when you go to the king's palace, you act differently. That's why they're guards. Where does Buckingham Palace get? I don't know where they really got it from, but you have to have guards around it. You go to any in Europe, you go to any where they're kings and queens, even if they have no power, they're guards 24/7. That's bekavod. That's the honor to the king. So that's true in the Beit HaMikdash. That was one of the roles of the Levim. You have to have honor guards. It's a special place. You don't just walk into the king's palace. Permission and dress codes and you can't wear any pockets in the Beit HaMikdash. All kinds of halakha that you have to treat a year. A shul is our home. We invite God to come and listen to us pray. And that's what Rav Soloveitchik explained. That's why there's no Kabbalas Yontif. Right? There's Kabbalah Shabbos, right? We just had Pesach. So we didn't have Kabbalah Yontif. We said, it's true, Kabbalah Shabbos only began in the 16th century. I know, it's a late day innovation. But the concept that we welcome God, that's existed already before the official Kabbalah Shabbos. But we don't have that in Beit HaMikdash. We don't welcome ourselves to somebody else's home. The host welcomes you. So on Friday night, we're the host, and we invite God to come and join. We're going to have a beautiful Shabbat experience. Come join us. On Yontif, on the Yamim Tovim, we go visit God. So we can't welcome ourselves to God's house. Yes, Zev, what do you want to ask?
Mitzvah Baba Vera, is that a takana d'Rabbanan or is that
No. That's a very good
it?
question. Very good.
Because
the Gemara talks about it. The Gemara originally assumes, I think, if I look, may assume it's only rabbinic. No, the Gemara assumes it's a biblical.
Well, then if it's rabbinic, then you don't need to come up with your answer. The answer is obvious. If a mitzvah, deraisa, overrides a negative mitzvah, it certainly overrides the takana d'Rabbanan.
No. So the Gemara says lulav hagazul vayavesh pasul, a stolen or dried lulav is no good. So the Gemara says bishlama yontav rishon. I understand on the first day of yontav why a stolen lulav is no good. It says lachem ulakaktem lachem. You must own it. You must own it, right? Everybody knows that you have to own the lulav on the first day. Lachem. Whatever. But what about Yontav Sheni? You don't have that halacha of lachem. That's only on the first day, right? So the Gemara says, no, it's a mitzvah ba'avera. Hold on. But isn't it a mitzvah ba'avera on the first day too? So it is. So that's the first sugya in Lulav HaGazul. That's I think I learned that in grade 10. That was
this is a semidaraisa.
No, so there is a question that does let's say mitzvah avera. Are you allowed to do a rabbinic sin to do a biblical mitzvah? The answer is generally no. I have to, in other words, to do a brit milah on Shabbos. Let's say, I have to look into this a little bit. Now I forget. I'm not holding there. Can you do a rabbinic prohibition to a biblical mitzvah? I will tell you there is a machloket. There's a fascinating debate. The fact that it's rabbinic generally doesn't matter. In generally, once we're doing mitzvot, the fact that it's rabbinic or biblical doesn't really matter. It sometimes matters when you can override a mitzvah. But here's a fascinating case. Let's say let's talk in the era. I don't know why I use this one. I really should use another one because I drink regular milk because all milk is Chalav Yisrael. But let's say Chalav Stam, that there's a rabbinic prohibition to drink milk that you don't know that a Jew didn't overwatch. Okay, that's a rabbinic prohibition, Chalav Yisrael. So let's say I go to the store and I buy you Chalav Yisrael. So what prohibition did I violate? I violated Lifnei Iver. I'm not allowed to, you're not allowed to help somebody sin. Lifnei Iver, Dotitei Mikshol has three meanings. I mean, Okay, maybe two and a half. The one meaning is you pull a chair behind somebody who, a guy's blind, you take away his white cane and you trip him, So that's leaf neiv or loti temusho. You put they just arrested somebody in Toronto. Unbelievable how disgusting people can be. It's in the news today. I heard about the case yesterday, and this morning I heard they arrested the guy. We have bike lanes in Toronto, so some driver threw a cart right into the bike lane, and the guy is in the hospital now. I mean, he's going to live, but knocked over. So he was charged with mischief, endangering life, whatever. I mean, so that's leaf naive or loti te mikshol, to put a stumbling block before somebody. But the other interpretations give bad advice. I'm blind to the situation. I'm not allowed to. It's very important for stockbrokers and real estate agents, anybody who's in an advisory role, lawyers, accountants. Very important mitzvah. And then there's the other idea. I'm not allowed to help you sin. So let's say I help you do a rabbinic sin. Did I violate lifnei iver rabbinically or biblically? So many, Tosfot, I think, discuss the question. I think he quotes many people say you violated biblically. We know the enabler is worse than the actual sin. It so fits in, right? When you enable somebody, lifnei iver, I'm not allowed to enable somebody to sin. Who cares what the sin is? I'm prohibited from enabling somebody to do wrong. The fact that what they're doing wrong is only wrong rabbinically, that's irrelevant. I'm enabling them to do something wrong. And therefore, the Torah says I can't do that. The rabbis define this as wrong. Good. So now, once the rabbis define this as wrong, the Torah tells us if I help him do it, I violate lifnei iver. Not everybody agrees to that. Machloket, some say it cannot be. What do you mean? The whole prohibition is rabbinic. How can the one who helps? But I like the first interpretation much better. I think we live in a society. We know the guy who sells the drugs is worse than the guy who uses the drugs. We do think the enabler is worse than the sinner. Okay, so yeah, leaf neighbor. Let's not. So mitzvah b'aver applies in both. Yes. Okay.
Let me ask you a practical question.
Quickly, if you don't mind. Otherwise, afterwards.
Let's say this is sort of, I don't know if it's exactly like your milk question, but let's say you know somebody, he's sick, he's asking you to help with his stuff, and you're helping him, and he doesn't keep kosher, and he asks you to go out and buy trash.
Right. Okay. So, we'll have to have another share on lifnei iver. I can discuss a little bit afterwards. Right. These are questions. What if he can do it on his own? That doesn't really count. It's a fascinating topic. Lifnei iver is a really important topic, not to help somebody sin. And because, especially when we live in an environment where most Jews are non-observant, and your fellow Jew just asks you to do something totally, oblivious. Like the question is, are you allowed to help him? So that's there's a lot written on it, and there is a basic idea if he could do it anyways. If he doesn't really need your help, it's convenient, so you help him. So that may not be prohibited, or at most it's a rabbinic prohibition. Maybe it's not prohibited at all. There's lots of detail, but I don't want to go too far afield. Let's get back to our siddur a little bit. So that
Can
was just.
I ask you?
Oh,
Can you?
okay.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
No, don't apologize. It's great when people ask questions. Okay. Yes.
It was unclear to me what you said about Kabbalat Shabbat as opposed to Kabbalat Yom Tov.
Right. There is no Kabbalat Yom Tov.
I understand. I know that, but
because we're going to God's
logic.
home. Because Yom Tov is we visit God, even though today we don't. With the Yom Tov, there's a mitzvah to go to the
Beis HaMikdash.
The Beit HaMikdash is God's home. That's why it's Yirat Hashem. And the shul, it's our home, and God visits us. Ki beiti
Right.
It's God's home. That's Beit HaMikdash. But a Beit HaKnesset is considered to be your home, and it's visiting. So we welcome the visitor. We can't welcome ourselves to God's house.
So Kabbalat Shabbat is where Makablim Pnei Hashem. Is that the idea?
Of course, that's what it is. Yeah, we're not accepting Shabbos. We're accepting God. I mean, no, we're welcoming God. Oh yeah, I mean, you just thought we're accepting Shabbos. That's
no. I never thought about it. So Kabbalat Shabbat is because
That's how Rav
Mekabel Bnei
Soloveitchik explained it.
Hashchina.
Yeah, and probably when you went to, to Beis Yaakov, whatever, they taught you're accepting Shabbos. So why these six prakim? But it's the idea that we're accepting God. That's really what it is. What's Shabbos? Shabbos is the unity of God and the Jewish people. The Medrash that day one had day two, three had four, five at six. No,
Right.
but it's
Where the
seven. That's
Ben
a seven at
Zug,
the
where
Jewish
the Ben
people.
Zug.
But
Right.
yeah, Shabbos is all about the Shechita. I mean, and I'm not into Kabbalah at all. I don't know anything, but and it's a very mystical. The idea of God's presence. Where did Kabbalah Shabbos develop? In Sfat with all the mystics. This is, this idea that I mean, it is interesting how the influence of the mystics have had on general halachic practice. But Kabbalah Shabbos, I believe is pretty much an Emshul. I think I heard Shner Lyman speak one. The last place to accept it was in Germany. I think in the 19th century. It took 300 years for Kabbalah Shabbos to be accepted around the world. But it's just in 6 more Mizmorim. I mean, guess. It's good if you come late to shul. It's okay. You can skip it if the cousins. No, odds if you come late to shul in their park, you skip Kabbalah Shabbos. I mean, then I would think there's no point to saying it afterwards. You've already accepted Shabbos. But anyways, yeah, we're really accepting God. We're welcoming God, and when we go to the temple, we can't welcome
And
God.
that's why we skip it. There are some times when we don't say it.
Yeah,
When
no.
it's
So the
Yom
minhag
Tov.
is when that's right. Like we didn't say it last Friday night on the Shvi Shel Pesach because it's already Chol Hamoed, right? That's a question. You have a 3-day yontif, and so
Right.
different. So in Nusach Ashkenaz they say Mizmor Shir Liyom HaShabbos. In Minhag Sfard they say the first two and the last two. They say Mizmor LeDavid, and the first two and last two paragraphs L'Chadodi. I must say. That's when we won't record this. Turn off the recording. Though, but so it's because it's not like I would never walk out of shul on Hallel on Pesach. My minhag is not to say Hallel at night. I think the minhag say Hallel night. I think is taken from the Gemara when you brought it at the Korban Pesach. Nosach Ashkenaz didn't say it. Whatever. So, but it's very you walk out of shul. No, that creates machlokim. That's not thinking. But for when they do this Kabbalah Shah, I can't take it on Yom Tov say Kabbalah Shah. They go to the washroom. Like I have to sort of walk out and I mean maybe a little bit. So we start Mizmor Shir, but because the shul I go, they daven the Sukkot. Okay, what can you do? Okay. Anyways.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, but that's why. Okay, so let's get back here. Now, I just briefly, I don't want to suggest it was Yom Ha'atzmaut, and really tomorrow's Yom Ha'atzmaut. I mean, we're in the middle. Yeah, but it's whatever. It's a very beautiful thing. We mentioned last week that they don't want to have any Chilul Shabbos, so they move it to yesterday. I assume the only vestige is you won't say Tzidkat Katzedek at Mincha, because you wouldn't say Tachanun. I think that's what, even when it's Heyar, you don't say Tachanun. Of course, even Heyar, by the way, is really because of Shabbos. The British, I don't know who here was alive in 1948. I won't ask anybody, but the British were leaving at midnight, like May 15th, not May 14th. And so really Israel was only allowed, if that's the word, to declare independence on Saturday, or midnight. But Ben Gurion declared the state. I don't know what time it was, 3:00 in the afternoon. I don't know whatever. Tell me whenever they declared the state, because he didn't want to do it on Shabbos. That in itself is pretty amazing, But okay, back here. So I want to very, very briefly talk about the Techazena Einenu. It ties in. It's not just God returning to Zion. So we discussed last week the idea: do we wait for God or do we do it ourselves? Obviously, that's the big machloket. I don't have to tell you, religious Zionism, rejecting religious Zionism, that debate still, in many ways, unfortunately, still rages today. So I do want to quote you. I imagine people have heard of the Gimel Shvuot, but the 3 oaths, that we'll take a very, very quick look at that. Okay, so I just want to start with an amazing Gemara that's like gonna kind of blow your mind, I think. I mean, okay, let's go here. So the Gemara is in Ktuvot. What's it doing in Ktuvot? Ktuvot is the love of a husband and a wife. So all the mitzvot about living in Israel are in Masechet Ktuvot. Right, we mentioned that before. Agad and Halacha, the Talmud was edited with phenomenal precision. So the stories of the destruction of the temple are in Gittin about a divorce, because the destruction was the divorce between God and and the Jewish people, Kiviyachol. And the stories about living in Eretz Yisrael are in Ktuvot, because that's the love of a husband and a wife. And the story about the Rabbi Akiva and the fox are in Makkot, where you view the suffering as something good. Right? Rabbi Akiva said, the famous story, he saw the fox and he was laughing because now he saw destruction. He knows something good will happen. So that's what lashes are about. Makkot, you give as a punishment, they're forgiven. So all the stories in the Talmud, you always have to ask, why are they doing there? So anyways, so the Gemara says like this is Ktuba 110 back B. Rav Zera kamishtameh minei Rabbi Yehuda the Valamei Eretz Yisrael. That's such a fascinating line. Rav Zera would avoid seeing Rabbi Yehuda. He didn't want to see his teacher, Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because he wanted to make Aliyah. Rav Zera was a Zionist. He wanted to make Aliyah. And Rabbi Yehuda didn't think making Aliyah was important. Not only didn't he think it important, he thought it was forbidden. Damar Rabbi Yehuda, Kol olem mi Bavel le'Eretz Yisrael over ba'aseh. Whoever goes from Bavel to the land of Israel violates a positive commandment. Wow. Just have to put America instead of Bavel, and now you have why many people don't go on Aliyah. Now, why not? So why is it prohibited to make Aliyah? That's what Rav Yehuda. So Rav Zera, he wanted to make Aliyah. He didn't want his Rebbe, telling him, what are you doing? It's wrong. You can't make Aliyah. So he avoided him. So he could make Bavel, he could go on Aliyah. That's such a powerful idea. So I would say maybe Bavel's a place of Torah. It was. There was more Torah in Bavel than in Eretz Yisrael. That's probably reason. So, but that's not exactly the reason the Gemara gives. He quotes a pasuk in Yirmiyahu. Bavela yavo. You should. This is Yirmiyahu talking. You're going to go to Bavel. V'shama you're going to be there ad yom pakadati atem, until I remember you. You wait for me. God says you'll wait for me. You'll wait 70 years, 500 years, 2,000 years. You'll wait, and then I'll bring you back. Num Hashem. So Rav Zera hu b'kli. So I'm not going to go in the back and forth of the Gemara, but this is here. Is this it? No. Okay. Whatever. Let me go back. Okay, I won't go to it. It is talking about the kalim, the vessels of the Beit HaMikdash. That's not important, all the technical details. I mean, it's important at some point, but not for us now. So they go back and forth. So then the Gemara says, so what does the verse mean? So they talk about these three oaths, the famous three oaths, and he says like this: Damar Shalosh Shavuot. This is based on Shir Hashirim now. That Hishpati Atchem Benot Yerushalayim. I made you take an oath. God said, the maidens of Jerusalem. So the Gemara and that expression Hishpati Atchem, right? Hishpati appears 3 times in Shir Hashirim.
Shir Hashirim.
Right, Shir Shirim, the love song, the between God and the Jewish people, the return, seeking the divine. So that's a metaphor, going back to the land of Israel, the divine presence coming together. So God made us take 3 oaths. Shelo yalu Yisrael b'choma. We shouldn't go up like a wall. Can't have mas aliyah. Can't have the World Zionist Organization go mas aliyah. Individuals can make aliyah, but you can't have a movement to make aliyah. And one that we shouldn't rebel against the nations. We know Yirmiyahu all the time. Go to Bavel, pray for the welfare of the government. I mean, that's a very strong Jewish thing, and so that applies to all times. You have to build houses, get married. Do not rebel. That was the traditional Jew, the Shtadlan, whatever. And one, God said, that the Goyim, the non-Jews, shouldn't persecute us so much. That's the Gemara. So this is what today is known as Satmar ideology. What before Satmar, before the 20th century, was known as a Jewish ideology. That was traditional Jewish belief. This Gimel Shvuah played a great role. As a matter of fact, the Rambam famously does not count living in Israel as one of the 613 mitzvot. So there are books and books to fill 15 libraries why the Rambam doesn't count it. The Rambam thinks it's a good thing to live in Israel. The Rambam rules lahalacha that it's better to live in Israel in a city that's mainly non-Jews than a city outside of Israel that's mainly Jewish. Nonetheless, the Rambam, not for now, nonetheless, the Rambam doesn't count it as a mitzvah. The Megillat Esther, Who's the Megillat Esther? Not the Mordechai. Megillat Esther was written, what do I forget his name? Detrani, I forget now. Megillat Esther is a commentary on Sefer HaMitzvot, and he named it for his mother, I believe. You have all the Chavat Yair. The Chavat Yair was a Yisrael Bachrak. He named it for his mother, Chava. It's very beautiful when the Marsha took on his wife's name, Edel's, and the Marsha took on his wife Edel's because she gave him the money so he could sit and learn and write a commentary on the Gemara. So why should the wife take my name? I'm going to take my wife's name. She's more important than I am. So they have all these things that today it sounds very modernish, right? Or you go to the Prague cemetery and the Maral's buried in like double right next to his wife. Things were different. People were, anyways. Okay, so what was I saying now? I just lost my train of thought. You see, what was I saying?
Esther on the
Right, the Megillat Esther. Right, I'm sorry. Thank you very much. So the Megillat Esther he's a commentary on the Sefer Mitzvot. So he writes the reason the Rambam doesn't count it as a mitzvah because of the Gimel Shvuot, because we're not allowed to go. There was a mitzvah, and God took it away, and He'll put it back. At Yemana Mashiach, he'll put it back. This view today is very not accepted. Let's put it outside of Satmar. That's where Satmar gets their ideology from.
I always heard he didn't count it because it was so foundational.
That's other people say. The Zionists say that. Yeah. It's like the problem. I heard that answer too when I was in Chief. The Rambam doesn't count because it's the basis of all mitzvot. And all mitzvot is so you can't count it. The problem, you could say that, but you can't say that in the Rambam. You know why you can't say that in the Rambam? Because the Rambam counts belief in God as a mitzvah. The Barbanel, others do not count the belief in God because they believe in God is foundational. Can't say, I follow 612 mitzvot. That belief in God, that's not for me. But I put on tefillin, I keep Shabbos. I don't believe in God. That makes no sense. So therefore, some say you can't have a mitzvah to believe in God. It's the foundation of all mitzvah. A mitzvah means you accept the mitzvah, but the Rambam doesn't accept that because the Rambam himself says, Yesod, the first mitzvah to be God. So I don't think that answer works I think those are hyper-Zionists trying to give that answer. And it could work for other people, but it can't work in the Rambam. Anyways, but that's why there's such a literature written. Why did the Rambam leave it out? And the Ramban is very upset at the Rambam for leaving it out. Ramosha Feinstein, of course, has his famous idea that there's no obligation to live in Israel, but if you live in Israel, you fulfill the mitzvah. It's a mitzvah kiyumit, like tzitzis. That's what he writes, like tzitzis. So as I was talking to one of my I'm not one to talk here, like I can't talk about Aliyah, but conceptually and intellectually, but a religious Jew a religious male Jew who doesn't put on tzitzit, whatever it is. That's not. But I just want to point out this Gimel Shvuot, which is an important piece of literature, but it was already. It's first of all, it's not quoted in the Rambam. It's not quoted in Shulchan. No halakhic source ever quoted it. It's an Agadic Gemara, and we don't follow halakha based on some strange. The Gemara goes back and forth. We just did one piece of it.
Rabbi Kelman?
Yeah.
Isn't there also the idea that you don't derive halacha from the Vim or Ksuvim?
Not true.
Not true? Okay.
Mitzvah
My son used to
Bavera.
tell me this.
Mitzvah Bavera, to go back to where it's talking, is derived from a pasuk in Malachi, I think. Many halachas. Onek Shabbos, Kavod Shabbos, derived from Yeshayahu. Your question, can you derive a biblical law? But it's still a biblical law. They're different, but we absolutely derive halachot from Nach. Maybe it's deeper. Sofrim, it may have a slightly different status. What's Megillat Esther, everything. But we don't derive halakha from Agadah. That's also a little bit of a machloket. What the role of Agadah is. Again, all of these require many, many shiurim, but what's the role of Agadah in terms of how we understand? But whatever it is, none of the halakhic authorities quoted, but I'll tell you the famous answer of the Meshech Chochmah, and he said it already. So the Meshech Chochmah said, you're not allowed to go bechoma, you can't go against the nations. It's a Balfour Declaration, that's it. Nations gave us permission. It means you're not allowed to go against the will of the nation. But according to that, and Rav Herzog said we have to follow the UN. We're a member of the Israel can't do what they want. I think that was one of his things. I'm not saying we shouldn't without but he said you can't destroy churches, even if you hold you should. I don't think you should, anyways. It was, but whatever. But you can't do that. Israel's a country in the modern world. There's certain things that override that. We're part of the. Yeah, we are part of the United Nations. People don't like that. Okay, what can I say? Yes, I know the United Nations is anti-Israel, but we still live. International law. There is something to international law, and that's what the Meshach is based on. You can't just go against what the world says. It's not the permissible. So the Meshach says, okay. The world said it's okay. The world said Balfour Declaration. That's say there. And then, of course, after the Holocaust, everybody noted. I mean, the Holocaust made many people Zionists. That's for sure. And and but after the Holocaust, everybody pointed out there were 3 Shvuot, and the third Shvuot that the nations of the world won't persecute us too much. Well, the Goyim didn't keep their half of the bargain. So the Goyim don't keep their half of the bargain. We don't have to keep our half. But whatever it is, you should just beware. It is interesting. Like I was in Israel over Pesach, and I mentioned I went to my cousin's house. My first cousin, who was the first woman ordained in Israel. Her daughter became the 100th. They thought they played games with already, but her daughter became the 100th woman ordained in Israel. She said she just retired as the dean of HUC, Hebrew College. Whatever. Whatever. I like her very much. I think she's great. Obviously, we don't agree on many things. So she brought me. I never seen this. She took me into her studies. She wanted to show me her grandfather's smicha. So her grandfather was Tova. What's his name again? Why am I forgetting? Levy, I think. Whatever. Her grandfather was a Reform rabbi. He got smicha from HUC in 1907, and it was amazing. She was telling me she showed me the Hebrew, how beautiful the Hebrew was. They did a rhyming yor, and they got yora yadin yadin. It was a traditional sort of smicha document with the beautiful flooring here. And she's saying my smicha document, it's such a such doesn't have that poetic thing. Why am I mentioning it? Just since her grandfather, my first cousin's grandfather, I'm related on her father's side. She's a Kelman, and this is the other side, her mother's side. So he was the president of the Reform Rabbinic Assembly, and as well known, the Reform movement was very anti-Zionistic. 1885 Pittsburgh platform. They're very much against Zionism. Germany, France, America. We don't believe in return to Zion. Judaism or a religion, not a nationality. Well, life changes, things change. And by the 1930s, there were many Reform rabbis who were Zionistic, and etc. And they brought it up in 1937, the Columbus platform, and there was a whole debate. To reform Judaism become part of the Zionist movement. And it was a tie vote, and the president only votes when there's a tie. And he voted to make the reform movement the Zionist movement. That's just whatever. That's just interesting. But it's not just reform. It's true in Orthodoxy, it's true everywhere. And the 1930s, unfortunately, changed a lot of things. But people should be aware of it. That ain't different. Okay, we're a little bit of far field today, but I hope you don't mind too much. But I think these are important things. But this all means, we don't have to wait for God. The class, I mean, some people still believe that. So what you don't have that extremism of Satmar, so all Satmar did is it's true. They didn't change. Satmar is the traditional view. I mean, maybe the way they express it against Zionism is whoa, but never was Zionism, so you don't know how you don't know how you don't know what the other people would have said. Yeah, the Satmar, they're doing what was always done. We wait for the Mashiach. That was the traditional view. Everybody else changed. That's what they say. The Aguda changed. Everybody changed. The Aguda didn't change 100%. They changed 80%. Whatever it is. Okay. Let's go on. Okay, let's discuss Modim. Enough of that. Okay, Modim, enough. That's it. So now we're into the next bracha. Zev, you asked me last week. Modim is the beginning of the bracha. We explained last week, of course. The bracha ends, right. I know I agree. You somehow get that feeling. Hamachazir Shkinato L'Tzion is the introduction to Modim. No. Hamachazir Shkinato L'Tzion is the conclusion of Ritzei. That's bracha 17. And now bracha 18, it's very nice, Modim, 18, Chai, used to be 17, now it's 18, of course. Modim, to give thanks, or to acknowledge, or to bow. Okay, that's right away, three-way machlok. What does the word Modim mean? So, hoda'ah, as hoda is to admit, to acknowledge, to say. That's one you have to express yourself. Just like when you do tshuva, you have to say it. The whole thing, can't think it. Thinking, we think a lot of things, but it's only meaningful. I mean, it's really meaningful only if we do it. But between thinking and doing is saying. When you say something, it has much more impact. You can't just think it. So that's why it's so important to express ideas. That's why tshuva, that's why vidui is such an important. Why do you need vidui? Why do you have to admit it? Soloveitchik discusses, how hard it is for people. How hard it is for people to admit wrong. Listen to politicians, how they apologize. If I offended you, I'm sorry. It's very hard for people to say I'm sorry. Just very hard. People don't like doing it. So that's why we place great emphasis on saying I sinned. The way we do it on Yom Kippur, that's like it's not real. That's like a little bit. That's to encourage. What you think of saying Hashem Bagando Gazan? Yeah, that's okay. A little bit. We have to say what we did. We have this silent Shmon Esrei to talk about your sins that you did, or of course when you sinned against another person. Obviously, we all know Yom Kippur doesn't help. You got to go to the person and say, "I'm sorry, I did this wrong." That's another debate, right? The Chavetz Chaim and the Rabbi Salanta, right? If the person doesn't know you wronged them, you have to go to them to beg forgiveness. I should be able to figure out which one said who, but that was a debate. Whether you don't know that I wronged you. I wronged you behind your back, and you never found out. So do I have to go in Erev Yom Kippur or before Erev Yom Kippur and beg for you? So that's a fascinating debate. Fascinating debate. Okay, not for now. Everything's a debate, but it's important to understand the ideas here, right? Why we all understand why you shouldn't. You shouldn't because let sleeping dogs lie. Well, what are you? He doesn't know you said anything bad. You're just going to dig up a can of worms, right? Right. That's so that's if the person doesn't know, that's good. And the other thing, what do you don't know? You did something wrong. The fact that they don't know, you have to apologize. The fact that they don't know doesn't take away from the wrong that you did. Okay, so that's why you have a debate. Anyway, so Modim, you have to admit it. You have to acknowledge. You have to say. One is the other interpretation to give thank you, Modim, where we thank you very much, and that's of course why we'll get there hopefully next week or the week after. Modim, when of course we all know very strangely every other bracha we answer Amen, but when it comes to Modim, everybody says their own Modim. We have what we call Modim de Rabbana. Well, that's why it's called Modim de Rabbana. It's not because it's okay. We answer Modim, and why do we answer? Because Amen. What does Amen mean? Amen means I agree. I mean, you hear Kiddush on Friday night. I agree. Amen. Yes, that it should be, may be that way. Everybody knows that. Amen for sure. So that's very nice. We asked for God to return to Jerusalem. That's great. We asked for forgiveness. Great. Amen. Baruch Priakapan. Amen. Mekadesh Shabbat. But when it comes to Thanksgiving, Amen isn't enough. Everybody has to say thank you. It's such a simple, beautiful idea. Every person has to say thank you on their own. It's not enough to say Amen. So Modim anachnu lach she'ata Hashem Elokeinu v'kei avotenu. So we all answer because that Modim, the
How you
idea.
doing?
I'm sorry. Okay, that's so that's the other, and then some say Modim means to bow, which is what we do now. We bow at Modim, so it's very interesting. So the Gemara, so we bow at the beginning of Shemon Esrei and the end of Shemon Esrei. That's really what we do. We bow in the first bracha twice. Baruch Elokeinu Avotenu. That bracha ends Magen Avraham. So we bow twice in the first bracha, and we bow twice in the 18th. We don't do it at Sim Shalom because we want to do it at the Hodah, giving Thanksgiving. We'll get there. But it's not that we bow at 4 blessings. We bow at 2 blessings twice. The beginning of the bracha, Modim, is the beginning, and Hatov Shimcha L'chana El Hodot, which also Thanksgiving is at the end. Now, the Gemara says you're not allowed to bow when you say Nodel Lecha. That's also Thanksgiving. When we bench, say Birkat Hamazon, we don't bow down. We don't even stand for Birkat Hamazon. You're not supposed to stand for Birkat Hamazon, right? So Nodel Lecha. Why don't we bow for Birkat Hamazon? The Gemara said you don't have to bow. You're not allowed to bow. It's harei zeh meguneh. It's not good. It's really inappropriate to bow. Why is it inappropriate to bow when we thank God when we eat? When we daven and we thank God, we're supposed to bow. And when we eat and we thank God, or when you say Hallel. you're not allowed to bow when you say hello. Why not? So Rav Soloveitchik has it's a simple, beautiful, Rav Soloveitchik's ideas on prayer. Prayer is total self-negation. We supplicate. We're nobody. We're nothing. I came up yesterday in my class in chat. We were talking about why there are need for a mechitza, the history when the mechitza. I mentioned that in Germany, right there. The Reform shuls in Germany, many of them had mechitzot. As a matter of fact, when we visited Germany on our Torah motion trip a number of years ago, we went to meet with the Reform rabbi in the afternoon. Very interesting guy, and then they were davening, let's say at 7 o'clock, and the Orthodox shul was davening at 8 o'clock. So we said, we're interested to come back to daven. And we said, do you mind? We may have to leave a minute early. We don't want to insult you. He said, no, come to say there. And it was fascinating. The shul had a mechitza. This is a Reform shul. Reform. It's not. When you think of reforms are different. The shul has a mechitza. They had a woman chazanit. They had an organ, a mixed choir, but a mechitza. Men and women don't daven together. It's amazing. So there was a Reform shul apparently offered like $1 million at the beginning of the 20th century by some donor in America on condition they take down the mechitza. No. Amazing. Principles. It's astounding. The mechitza is an American thing. The lack of mechitza, that's America. I mean, maybe some shuls in Germany had it, but many did not. They had the mechitza maintained it. Ada yom hazeh. And the mechitza became whatever the big debate between conservative and Orthodox. And in the 50s and 60s, half the time you couldn't tell what was an Orthodox shul, what was a conservative shul, just by the mechitza. The davening was the same, and many conservative shuls had a complete davening. The parking lot was full in the Orthodox shul. If you just read Jewish Action, the last issue in Jewish Action, that was very interesting. I just was reading it actually 2 days ago. Elon Feldman, that's Emmanuel Feldman, who built up Atlanta. His son is the rabbi. So his son was writing about the history of the parking lot. And he wrote when he was 9 years old, he was looking out the window and he was waiting for cars to come on a Shabbos morning so they'd get a minyan. He didn't understand what was wrong. Of course, everybody drove to shul. And he saw that the history of the shul is the history of what happens in the parking lot. And then eventually the parking lot goes there. I don't have to tell you, there was an era where parking lots were open, and maybe some say they should still be open. You want to encourage people to come whenever that's there. Anyways, it's very fascinating. So the mechitza, we're discussing, why do you need a mechitza? And why is it so people in today's era, it's very hard to explain. We live in an egalitarian society. We have women Orthodox rabbi, women everything, women CEO. Why do you need a mechitza? So what would you answer that? So the traditional answer, you can't concentrate on the davening if you're sitting, So that's, of course, that's true too. Well, it's not always 100% true because first of all, a lot of shuls you can see the woman, and Rav Moshe Paskins, the mechitza doesn't mean you can't see, it just means you can't mingle. You're allowed to see, you can't mingle. But I don't have to tell you the mingling sometimes in the men's section is worse. We were discussing, I teach in a co-ed high school, so we all know, everybody knows, the boys in the class in bid. If I was teaching, this class happens to have 27 kids. It's a big class, but it's a good class. So if I took the 12 boys out of the class and I had them, the boys and the girls, the boys were the animals. Everybody knows that, teenage boys in an all boys class. Put a few girls in the class, they behave because, that's just the way it is. Anybody who teaches in a co-ed high school, I think, I like, if anybody wants to challenge what I'm saying, I'm happy to hear their challenge, but there's no doubt about it. And the research shows for girls, it's not always good to be in a mixed environment. For the boys, it's way, way better. So anyway, so it's hard because the boys in shul, they talk, so that's an issue. And I've said many times, and I'll say it again, that I think it's a greater violation of halakha to talk in davening, in the middle of Chazar Shas, everybody's talking, whatever, than to sit mixed. To sit mixed quiet is less of a lack of. I know orthodoxy and sociology, that's totally, one is terrible and one is just people talk and one is not orthodox. But halakhically, there's no doubt in my mind that talking quietly, sitting next to your wife is much better halakhically than talking to, having the guy schmoozing on the Leaf game last night, in the middle of that. But that is true. It's hard. Yeah, you have good looking girls there, but that I'm not denying that reason. But Rav Soloveitchik really focused on something else, and he said, because when we daven, we stand alone before God. We're self-negation. We're pleading. We're nothing. It's very hard. That's why prayer is so hard for us, because Baruch Hashem, we don't feel that way. And when there's difficult times, and maybe since October 7th, a little easier to daven, unfortunately. It's good to be hard to daven. It means life is good. That's why the Ramban says you don't have to daven. We've discussed many times. You only have to daven in a time of need. If life is good, what do you have to daven for? So the Rambam disagrees. So that's what the Rav says when we daven. Of course, we're here. Other humbleness, self-negation, shattered and bankrupt life. That he says that's when we daven. But when we benching, basavata, bachalta vesavata, we're satisfied, we're satiated. And you look in the Torah, we'll just go maybe next week. The Torah just puts benching, you'll come to the land, it will be flowing. That's where you have Eretz Avat Chalav Udvash, the Shiva Minim, waterfalls. What a beautiful land. You're going to eat and be satisfied. Build beautiful homes, wonderful. That's not bowing. Bowing is I'm like a nobody. That totally inappropriate. It's a different mood, even where we thank God out of despair and we thank God out of plenty. And both are important and both are biblical mitzvot. Benching maybe even more. Benching, everybody agrees is a biblical mitzvah. Prayer may only be rabbinic, but they're very different types of thank yous. So I think it's a simple but beautiful idea that the different, and obviously Hallel, we understand that why you can't bow in Hallel. That's not for bowing, that's for dancing and singing and joy. And prayer is, and that's what the Rebbe said. That's why we need a mechitza. We don't want you. The family offers support. You're with your wife, your husband. No, you're alone before God. You have to stand alone. And I believe the Rebbe said, if I remember correctly, that in Europe, either fathers and sons didn't sit next to each other. We view that as a beautiful thing. The son and the mother and the daughter sit next to each other. Very beautiful. I agree, it is. But I think the Rav, I don't know if it really was true, or sometimes that they didn't sit right next to each other. I find that hard to believe, because the Rav other times talk about, his father davening, his grandfather's, whatever that is. But in davening we're alone. That's why we have a mechitza. Not so much. It distracts from the goal of prayer. A mechitza means you're with your family. A non-mechitza means. Anyways, that's what he said. Okay, it's later. We have a couple minutes overtime. This very, very quick review. Nothing is 100% true. Correct. I don't know what you're referring to when I say I know nothing's 100% true. I mean, I don't know nothing, but okay, you can tell me.
You had mentioned something about it. It's not 100% true. We're talking about the mechitza, and I mean, I don't know. I just think it's very controversial because, like, for example, and you mentioned something about, and you had asked if there's any educators that teach co-gender, and I can just tell you that it is a problem that, well, like, for example, my son, he's in a co-gender class and has crushes on girls, and
Right, there are other issues. Yeah. I hear. Okay, I wasn't giving you. Listen, my Maimonides was co-ed. That's the whole debate. But whatever. Listen, but I mean, obviously, I teach in Shat. The kids aren't from many of them. I mean, there's a wide range. So it's not even like to discuss. But they all have friends. A lot of them have friends in Orkai, like the all boys and girls school. They all know about Beishiago. But it's different. There are many advantages to teaching.
Right.
I've
I
been
don't
thinking
think that the other thing that you had mentioned was like, oh, well, what does it make it any better that there's men talking in the men's section? And I don't think like two wrongs make a right or whatever. I think
100%.
that just because that men are talking in the men's section doesn't mean that there shouldn't be
Yeah.
machitas.
I didn't say that.
There
I'm
needs
sorry. Yeah, I
no, but I
agree.
mean, it kind of implies that, oh, if men are talking in the win section, what does that make almost any difference? That, I mean,
All I'm
obviously
pointing out is what I'm
there should
pointing
be
out is
like fences around fences. Like there should be not only
well,
in order to
no,
create the distraction, so the men should not be talking in the men's
you're
section.
right.
Just like and one more thing I want to say is that I've been on the balcony at an Orthodox synagogue that I have problems with these mechitzas sometimes because there is no mechitza and I want my privacy. And you see the men staring at you while they're in the middle of Shemona Esrei or whatever davening. They're looking up the balconies on the side. The men can see all the women. And I mean, this is something that for me, I want my privacy when I'm davening.
Okay,
I don't want
so
any.
there are many shuls there. So fine, I hear that. So I would recommend going to a shul where the men and women can't see each other. There are many shuls like that, the mechitza. I mean, again, I wasn't suggesting that. All I was pointing out is that that we make a very big deal. The mechitza became the issue, dividing Orthodox and conservative, and somehow talking and davening which Baruch Hashem, many shuls are very good about that, but still many shuls are not. I don't know. That's no secret. And, the halakha, whatever, and it's stuff we can discuss after. But, that to me, that's a more serious halakha problem. It doesn't mean you do one, you do two. Just means that it's funny. What becomes important, what becomes, and everything depends on muscle. And certain mitzvot are neglected. People don't do them, and nobody cares. And certain mitzvot, people make big deals about them. And often when we make a big deal about it, it's not necessarily what's more important. It's just the way life works. That's sociologically. What can I tell you? That's why orthodoxy is not exactly the same as halacha. It's not like it's different. And by the way, a lot of the disputes, let's say. People will, even Rav Schechter, who I don't, if he's know, his view on women's role is not, let's say, even though I'm a dear student of his, was here for 4 years, I quote him all the time. I don't see eye to eye with him on his view on women. I think that's pretty obvious. Those who know his view and those who have heard me speak. I have a different people, different views. And, but even Rav Schechter, I remember saying once that halakhically, there's no problem with a woman reading the Megillah, women's Megillah reading. But we're not just looking at halachically. We have to go beyond that. In other words, or he said in Hilchot Kriyas Megillah, it's allowed. That's how we put it. Hilchot Kriyas Megillah, it's allowed. A woman can read the Megillah. Maybe even for men. Maybe even for men.
I mean, those are different issues.
But in Hilchot,
They're different
Kabbalah
issues,
Tzibur,
though. You're mixing issues. Those are
Okay.
different. But I do agree, women should allow to read the Megillah. I don't agree they should read it in front of men, but
Right,
they're different. Those are two. Also within itself, those are two different issues. I mean, we can't mix them. So
all I'm trying to say is Jewish practice goes beyond halacha, and that's why we have poskim. We don't always just look at technical things. There are other factors that have to be taken into consideration. What fact, all these issues and that's where the debates generally revolve around. Usually with the people, the halakhic sources are there. How do you apply them? How to interpret? Do they still apply? So these are important issues. But anyways, okay, I don't want to. Yeah, too much
I
on that.
just want to say
Very
thank
quickly,
you
hold
so
on.
much.
Hold on. No. After
No,
I finish. No.
I just wanted to thank you.
No. Please. I'll
Thank
I'll
you.
I'll let you speak in 1 minute. I just want to do a quick review so people can leave, and then I'm happy to argue with you for as long as you'd like. Okay, just very, very quickly, we discussed God going into exile. Okay, we discussed journalism a little bit from last week. Journalism is a great mitzvah done properly. It's very important. You have to talk Lashon Hara. Often you're obligated to talk. We said that's a debate. Is that an Aveira Lishma? Is that a sin you're doing properly motivated? And then you have to be properly motivated. So even though you might help somebody talking Lashon Hara, if you're not motivated, you can't say it. Or you say, no, there's no Aveira. When it has a clear benefit, you must talk Lashon Hara, and then who cares what your motive is? And therefore, if you're not motivated, you must talk Lashon Hara. But in a court of law, and I say the Chafetz Chaim book is basically when you're allowed, and therefore you're obligated to talk Lashon Hara. And journalism is a very important role. Yes, journalists, you want a religious journalist, you want them who learns the halachot, but yes, to dig up information on people, public figures, is very important. You want to know who you're hiring, who you're getting. You want to go into politics, you have to, unfortunately, what they dig up sometimes is inappropriate. And in other words, they dig too much into things that are not relevant. But okay, that we discussed. Then we discussed a little bit that the Beit HaMikdash is a place of fear. We have love of God and fear of God, or awe of God. In the Beit HaMikdash, we focus on Yirat Hashem, and the halachas are very different. There's a special halachas how we act in the Beit HaMikdash versus how we act in a shul. The Beit HaMikdash is God's home, the shul is our home, therefore there's no Kabbalah Shabbos on Yontif. There's no Kabbalah Yontif, there is a Kabbalah Shabbos. And then we discussed a little bit, coming back to Zion, waiting for God or not. And the Gimel Shvuot, Rabbi Yehuda said you shouldn't make Aliyah. Pretty amazing. We don't follow Rabbi Yehuda. I mean, halachically, but he felt you should stay in Babel. I mean, I guess some people do. Some people do feel that there's more Torah in Chutz La'aretz. You stay in Chutz La'aretz. The Gemara itself says one of the reasons you're allowed to leave Israel is to learn Torah. I mean, it's hard to say that there's not Torah in Eretz Yisrael, but whatever. Maybe somebody, they're Rabbi, they're very comfortable with somebody who lives in America and doesn't live in Israel, and they want to be there. Okay, maybe that is a good reason. So Rav Zera said, Rav Yehuda said you shouldn't make Aliyah. And we talked about the 3 oaths and if they have any practicality, and maybe even if they were, not anymore. The Goyim didn't keep their half of the bargain, but who cares? It says on Agada Gemara, we don't base on Agada fine. And then we just introduced Modim to say thank you, to acknowledge. It's very hard to acknowledge things, especially when we do something wrong, but that's why it's so important lahodot, and that's important in thank you, in giving gratitude, and it's important in tshuva, in asking for forgiveness, and then of course the idea of giving thank you, and everybody has to give thank you. Amen doesn't work. You have to say Hoda. Okay, that's pretty much. Now I'm happy to take any question. Rachel, if you want to argue with me some more, that's fine. Just on Sunday, no, I mean, these are really important topics. I don't know if you heard Gila Rosen's talk. Who here heard Gila Rosen's talk on Rav Aaron Lichtenstein? If you didn't hear, it's really
She was amazing.
fascinating. And the story, I mean, I wrote to her last, I said, I have not heard of this lawsuit that, Dr. Lamb claimed that he can't have women in the shear because the women, for those who weren't there, I'll very quickly tell you, Gila Rosen is a rabbinite in Israel. Her husband or her father-in-law, I guess, is the founder of Yakar. And in Israel, a very interesting place. And she's a Yoetzet Halakha, so she went, when she made Aliyah, she went to Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Shir in the Gris Kola, where I went to the shir, not the same time. When you're in the Smicha program, you go to Israel. So Rav Aaron gave a 3-hour shir every week. My year, she did it on Ramban, right? She mentioned some years. Her years, they, wasn't Ramban, but 3-hour shir. And she used to go to the shir. And after a few years, Dr. Lamb called Rav Lichtenstein and said, you can't allow women in the shir anymore. And Rav Lichtenstein refused to say no. I do allow women this year, and I'm not going to ask them to leave. Then we want to learn Torah, and then he disobeyed his boss, Dr. Lamb. And the next year, Dr. Lamb called him and he said, you must. And he said, there's some lawsuit. The women want to go to shir in YU. And we told them that in an Orthodox yeshiva, you can't have men and women in the same shir. But they said, no, Rav Lichtenstein, that's part of Yeshiva University, he's giving shir to men and women. How come that's allowed? So he had no choice. So I have to follow up on that lawsuit, whatever. And he had no choice. So Rav Lichtenstein then called up Gila Rosen and apologized. Felt terrible. I have to ask you to leave the shir. But I said, I'm not the balabite here. I'm not the boss. But in my yeshiva, I'm the boss. So please come to my shir in Yeshiva Hearts. And that's such a beautiful story. That's Rav Lichtenstein. For those who didn't meet him and his love, I was talking to him, to my son this morning, who's in Yeshiva Hearts. Now he obviously never met Rav Lichtenstein, but he said the stories they tell about Rav Lichtenstein are unbelievable. Everybody knows the stories. I mean, he never missed a shir in his life. His dedication to Talmud Torah was astounding. He would get off the plane and go straight to give shir, and whatever, and his sensitivity to people, and seeing the complexity of issues. What I mentioned, having Mivakshei Panech, and that book where Rav Chaim Sabato introduced him, said, you spent 4 years at Harvard. What did you learn? He learned life is complex, and that's so true. And I think that's really one of the differences in many ways. I come from a world where life is complex, and Judaism is complex, and Orthodoxy is complex. Everything's complex, and there's no black and white, and everything is halomei mikol, and we can learn from everybody and everything, and whatever. Okay, but if you didn't listen to it, I only told you part of it, so I will advise you. Right, Debbie? It's worth listening to, 100%. And but anyways, and I said last week, they asked me to speak in Shumai Shabbos afternoon shir to speak on Rav Aaron. So I spoke, and I realized I only scratched the surface. So I decided I'm going to do a few weeks on Rav Aaron. I mean, you're welcome to come, but it's hard to get here for sure. You can stay at our house if you want to come for Shabbos to Toronto, so it actually really inspired me. I mentioned I started doing a lot of reading. Rav Aaron, very nice. Okay, any other question, Rachel? What do you want to say now? Anything? But I hear everything. Yeah, Marty. Yes, Bakasha.
Very a couple things. You asked last week ago where Ari Coleman is. Ari Coleman is on the faculty of the Columbia School of Journalism.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. There was a little noise in the background. I'm sorry.
You asked a couple weeks ago,
Right?
where Ari Coleman is now.
Where who is now?
Ari Coleman.
Ari Goldman.
Oh, Ari Goldman. Yes. We were talking about Dr. Lamb's nephew, who was the journalist in Search of God at Harvard. Yeah, he was the New York Times religion editor. Yeah, well, I haven't heard from him in 25 years. What's he doing?
I know him because Black introduced me to when I came to New York. He's on the faculty of the Columbia
Right, right. I heard
School
that, right? He
of
teaches in the
Journalism.
journalism school at Columbia, right?
It
But
can't be that good at school because
well, Columbia now, okay, that's
no, this is what accepted me.
oh, they accepted you. Very nice. Very nice. Yeah. Has anybody read Ari Goldman's book In Search of God in Harvard? I read it like 30 years ago.
Yes,
It's very
and
it was
he
a disturbing book in many ways, but that's a different story yet. Whatever. Okay, not for now. But no, Ari was the religion editor of the New York Times. They paid for him to go to Harvard for a year. He said you can't be a religion editor unless you know all religions. He has to study more about religion and whatever. Okay.
now
Anyway,
now
that's
now he takes his. I used to take a. He told me he took his. He teaches religion at Columbia.
he teaches religion. Okay, very nice.
To,
Okay.
he takes the journalist student to Israel.
All right, very nice. Yeah, I mean, I never met him, but I know he's Dr. Lamb's nephew and whatever. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Rachel, you want to follow up on the women's issue? We can discuss another. You can
No, I
write.
just wanted to say thank you for taking the time to tell me, because I understand, I get what you're saying, that you're just kind of going over the
These
different.
are complex issues. These are complex
Right.
issues, and then people disagree. Good people disagree on both sides of the issue. And really, listen, like so many changes have happened in the world around us, and the question is, how should halakhic Judaism, whatever you want to call it, respond? And not only respond, how should we initiate? And maybe that's also sometimes Chris, we shouldn't only respond. We should sometimes be the leader. So that's the question. How far do you go and what about the issues and how to learn them? More importantly, how to learn to get along with people who you disagree with, and
I personally think that women should be in one synagogue and men should be in the other. No, maybe that's an extreme. They could come
well,
together at the
that's the all
social hall.
the women prayer groups. What do you think women prayer groups were? Before partnership, I mean, I don't know. Does anybody still have women prayer groups? I think it's not so popular anymore because they go now to partnership meeting. But that was very common, very common.
Has
Yeah,
one.
women prayer groups where women would get together exactly because they felt at home. They would do. Reb Goren said they could read the Torah. Other people said they couldn't read the Torah. Other people were totally against women prayer groups. We had all kinds of views on them. But the women would come together and daven like they do at Beis Yaakov every morning, but just. That was different somehow, That was one of when people complained about how can women, they go together Shabbos Mincha or Rosh Chodesh, the woman would daven together. Say, well, how can you do this? It's terrible. What do you mean, how can you do it? Beis Yaakov, the girls daven together every morning. Why? But obviously, it's somehow right. Why are some things acceptable? Why when the Beis Yaakov girls do it in the morning, daven together, it's beautiful, and when the modern Orthodox women get together on Rosh Chodesh to daven Mariv, it's not acceptable. It's a little bit hard to explain that, at least where I'm coming from. I think it's impossible to explain why there's any difference, but okay, that's my opinion. But anyways, I see where it's a little different. Okay.
No, I agree. I agree with that. I mean, if women should be able to, daven together, and
So
I don't know
I
whether they're
mentioned,
reform or
I mentioned, I said this last week, I think. I don't know if it was here or somewhere else where, Moshe Meiselman, the Reb's nephew, who's basically Satmar. He participated in the Satmar rally that they had a few years ago against drafting soldier. He's very, very much on the deep end, but he's an MIT Harvard graduate, and his kids aren't. And he changed a lot, obviously. But he wrote the first book, the first major book examining these issues on women in Jewish law, appeared in the 70s. And in that book, he has a whole discussion, should women learn Gemara, which obviously his uncle thought is a good idea, because in Maimonides, the girls had to take Gemara. So and
that's great.
yeah, so but he said that today, yeah, it's true. Maybe women should learn more about. You have women doctors and women principals and women chemists and women cabinet ministers. Women get a PhD in physics, but get a grade 4 education in Judaism. We're going to cut off your education. So you're going to think Judaism is silly and infantile. That's why Rav Soloveitchik felt it's important. Don't teach the boys Baba Kama and the girls Megillah. Teach the boys and the girls Baba Kama. If the girls can do just as much, and that's obviously, that's not acceptable. But even he, I imagine today he wouldn't say that. But that's what he wrote in the 70s, that if a woman can get a PhD in chemistry, clearly she can learn Gemara. We should, that it would be wrong not teaching Gemara, because you want to teach them. We do everything else on a sophisticated level. You have to do Torah on a
That's
sophisticated
amazing. That's
And
amazing.
that's why Rav Arn Lichtenstein welcomed women to share. And Rav Arn Lichtenstein gave co-ed shiurim to smicha students and girls in the shir. Like it's beautiful because it's so looked down upon. And here you have a Gadol Yisrael, doing this, and it's amazing. Okay. All right. Anything else? I see people are interested a little bit in this. I don't know. Maybe more
Yeah,
than
no, I mean, I see that. I think that one thing that's kind of confusing about it is that, to give women rights or whatever versus the necessity. I mean, it's really a problem with the men. The reason why we need a mechitza, for example, is like the reason why we need a
No, not the way the
separation.
Rav explains it. The way the Rav
Yeah.
explains it, it's just for the woman too, because the Rav is explaining that we stand alone before God. And remember, davening, and we'll pick up on this next week, actually, in
Yeah.
Modim. It comes up in Modim, that basically the fundamental aspect of prayer are equal for men and women. Maybe, yes, maybe woman doesn't have to have been married, maybe.
But they don't have the same challenges that men have, with
I
like,
don't know. They have
Can I say something?
yes, please.
Yes.
I have a completely different view. I live in Israel now. I go to a Shivyoni Minyan. It is the most beautiful
Okay.
experience.
I'm sorry, which
And
minyan did you go
a
to?
Shivyoni partnership
Oh,
Minyan.
partnership minyan. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
And it is the most beautiful service. I get such pleasure about seeing the girls taking part. My grandchildren go to sort of a modern Orthodox setup where it's a lovely minyan, and the rabbi there, Nathaniel Buchs, tries his best to include the women in a very nice way, but we are not really part of it.
Yeah, listen, I went to a partnership minyan once because I was invited to a simcha there, and I must say I was a little, I had these, like, I don't know, flu in my stomach. I didn't know how I was going to feel like going to this minyan, and I was invited to a simcha, and I must say it was very beautiful. And then I invited a second time to a bar mitzvah at a partnership minyan. No, the other time, yeah, also, and it was because generally these minyanim are very quiet. What I was talking about, the talking before, I don't know, they tend to be very serious. Obviously, there's a lot of opposition to it. I just think that
What, I don't know what it is. I don't understand it. What do you mean
It's
partnership
just
minyan?
simply to share doing the service. That's
between
what it is.
co-genders?
Yes,
Between other human
woman can
beings.
lane. Woman
No,
can
but
lane.
there's- yeah.
Between other human beings who simply have a few different chromosomes that are different, but in
Yeah,
all other
absolutely.
respects are the same.
No, absolutely. It's just a difference in the way that we look at things. So, I mean, fundamentally, really. So, I mean, I personally believe that men do have like that even though we're women, we don't really see the difficulties of men, but the men, it's a challenge for, it really is a challenge for men.
Well, here in Israel, it's almost Shabbat, so I can't say much more now, except to say I don't think that's true. I think people grow up according to their own particular ways and also the expectations. So if you say to a man or a woman that this and that is how you might well feel, they might develop in that direction. Whereas if you say respect for one another should be common wherever you are, it's not a
Right.
problem. So
I'm a musician. I'm a violinist. And
yeah.
and so I'm also very sensitive on that kind of level too. That I understand like the whole Kol Isha, which I'm assuming there is Kol Isha at these partnerships, what you call them. I've never heard of this before, but I'm sure that they exist. I mean, especially outside of Orthodox. But anyhow,
This
but
minyan considers itself orthodox in
Right.
every way. and the service is the same. We just share it.
But they have Kol Isha. They have
Yeah,
Kol
but it's
Isha.
according to many poskim, I would say it's not an issue.
The Kol Isha is only
But
supposed to refer to saying Shema Yisrael.
that's a whole other discussion. But
Yeah.
even if you assume that it's a problem there, so the Sri Deyesh has this famous tshuva that when women sing together, Zmirot or Kodesh, it's not Kol Isha. That's all.
Right. But they're not. Are they singing together if a woman is laning at the
It's
like
assumed
being a
not to be Kol
chazanot?
Isha. The
Chazanot?
Gemara,
Yes.
when the Gemara talks about woman aliyot, in the time of the Gemara was acknowledged as women had aliyot. They read from the Torah. They were not bothered by Kol Isha. It was
What
not
I have a
considered an
question
issue.
then. I have a question because this is very personal to me as a musician. What if like my husband was singing duetting with another woman and it was just them?
I'm listen.
That's
I'm not.
you
I'm
know what
not
I
gonna.
mean? I'm
Okay.
just saying, for example, because the thing with this is that as a musician that I am, and I'm a professional too, is that I understand very clearly what the power of music is and how playing music is very powerful. You know, especially a woman playing music with a man, especially a woman singing. It's powerful. So I'm just saying that but a lot of people don't get it because they're not on the same. Musicians are on a different, we're like different species almost. Like, and scientists proven it too, according to the neuroscientists, we're different than other people, professional musicians and whatnot. And so, unlike any other thing that you can do, like wood building or whatever, building houses or playing tennis, so music is something that's very sensitive and
I'm going
special.
to have to say goodbye to you because
Yeah.
it's late
Okay.
here.
I think
but
we can end here.
that's-
We can continue to be continued. There's a lot. These are okay. These are important issues, and right there, there's much to discuss.
Can I just say one comment? I have sing myself, and I think that it is the thoughts and the words that matter. I don't think the music can in any way harm an individual. I think if the mind is positive and the words are good words. So I'm not going to say more. Shabbat shalom. We all have different
Thank
views.
you. Okay, everybody. I mean, nobody has to stay, but thank you, whatever, and we'll to be continued. That's Baruch Hashem.
That's a whole nother conversation too.
different.
Rabbi Nachman talks a lot
Where
about that.
are you in Yerushalayim?
I'm in Modim. I
Oh, in
live in
Modim.
Modim,
Okay,
yes, which is a
okay.
wonderful city because it has all kinds of people with all views, and so far nobody's gone crazy.
Good. That's as why you should live and let live. That's
Yes,
okay. Shabbat shalom,
thank you.
everybody. We hope
Shabbat
to
shalom.
see you next week, and please God,
Thank you so much.
continue Rabbi Liebtag on Sunday morning, and Benny and all our shiurim. Okay, and Shabbat shalom, everybody. Be well. Thank you. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.